Hello, I'm Jace DeCory, and I live in Spearfish, South Dakota in the beautiful Heska, the Black Hills. And I'm a retired assistant professor from Black Hills State University, and which I enjoy as well. And I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the South Dakota Humanities Council, which produces the annual Festival of the Books. We're so pleased you've joined us for the one virtual 2021 event. We would like to acknowledge first and foremost that this program comes to you from ground, which is a homeland of the Oceti-Sakowin, the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota people. The South Dakota Humanities Council honors and appreciates the Indigenous people who have the longest relationship to this place. Before this event gets underway, I'd like to share some housekeeping details. We ask that you keep your microphone muted throughout the event to minimize background noise. If you'd like to ask questions or share comments with today's presenters, please type them in the section, the chat section on Zoom, but you can open by clicking on the conversation bubble at the bottom of your screen or on the comment section on Facebook. We will pass along as many as possible at the end of the session. We encourage you to buy books or buy our presenting authors at your local independent bookstore. Our official festival booksellers are Books A Million and the Birdcage Bookstore and Mercantile, both in Rapid City. The second one, the Birdcage, is owned by Lily Mendoza. She is a Lakota girl from the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation. So I'm excited to say that. You can also buy directly from the authors and their publishers. And so perhaps they might be in the chat, I'm not sure. So to help us continue to improve the festival, we'd appreciate you filling out an evaluation form, and a link will be shared as it is. You see that on your chat. And also, finally, you can help keep the festival free by making a tax-deductible donation to the South Dakota Humanities Council. Just visit our website, southdakotahumanities.org, and click on the donate button. The festival would not be possible without the generous support of the numerous organizations and individuals who have already donated and are acknowledged on the back cover of the festival guide. And so you can, this is the festival guide, looks like this. And so you can check that out on our website. And now let's get on with the show. I have three individuals. We have three individuals that we're going to be spotlighting today. And the first individual that will be talking is Kevin. But first, let me introduce them all right now, because then I won't have to be coming in again and bugging you and giving you more information on them. So let me talk about Kevin Noble Maillard. He's a professor and a journalist. He lives with his family on the 13th floor of a 15-year-old bank in Manhattan, or Brooklyn, maybe. A regular writer for the New York Times. He's interviewed politicians, writers, tribal leaders, and movie stars. His children's book, Fry Bread, won the 2020 Robert F. Seibert Informational Book Medal and was the 2020 American Indian Youth Literature Picture Book Honor winner. Originally from Oklahoma, Millard is a member of the Seminole Nation Miccosukee Band. The second person I'd like to introduce is Denise Lajimodiere. Denise is an enrolled member of the citizen of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. She spent 44 years as an educator, retiring as associate professor from the School of Education at North Dakota State University in Fargo. Lajimodiere co-founded the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition and has published poetry, academic work, and a children's book, Josie Dances. A traditional jingle dress dancer and Ojibwe birch bark biting artist, she lives on the Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation. And the third person on the panel here is David Haskell Wanbli Wyden. David is an enrolled citizen of the Sechango Lakota Nation, is the author of the novel Winter Counts, nominated for the Edgar Award, Anthony Award, Barry Award, Thriller Award, and the Hammett Prize. The book won the Lefty Award for Best Debut Mystery Novel and the Spur Award for Best Contemporary Novel. Wyden has also written Spotted Tail, a biography for middle graders. He lives in Denver with his family. Welcome, all three of you. I'm so excited and pleased to see Native American authors and books which talk about and are related to our people. So thank you, my relatives, for being here. So Kevin, would you like to start first?
Sure will. Thanks everyone for coming out logging in this morning to join us to talk about how we switched from adult writing to children's book writing, or not even switched, or just incorporated that into our larger body of work. So I'm going to screen share with everybody, and here we go. This is my faculty page at Syracuse University. I've been a tenured professor there since 2004. And at Syracuse, I became a law professor. Like when I went to law school, I became a law professor. I never practiced that much. I went straight into academia. And when I wrote my dissertation, I did a JD PhD. I had always focused on issues of racial identity, racial intermixture, blended families, and especially issues of Black Native blended families. And so my first academic book, which was for tenure back in, oh my gosh, I blocked it from memory. That we have a couple other professors on the panel here. Everyone can understand that. Like, I willfully do not remember my tenure process, but this was my first academic book, Loving versus Virginia in a Post-Racial World. I was really interested around this time of all of these issues about people being disenrolled from their tribes. In Oklahoma, where I'm from, Seminole Nation, we went through that. We're still going through that now. These issues of who counts as a member, who's legitimate, who is authentically Native. And it's such a difficult question, right? Because we have these very Hollywood images that I think that we as Native people have largely, like, we have absorbed that. People who are not Native have absorbed that. So then there's this very difficult conversation of what it means to belong and who is entitled to authentically claim themselves as Native. So I continued these issues after writing these academic books. I continued this with the New York Times. I started writing for them in 2011. This isn't my first piece, but this was the first big piece in the Times. And I remember when I was writing and kind of incorporating my academic interests about identity and authenticity and Native identity into a more public platform, I was amazed at first by the response. So if we go back to this academic book, right, I think total since this was published in like 2008 or something like that, this academic book has sold probably about 1,500 copies total, right? So I'll get like a royalty check, and then the royalty check will be like, you have earned $4.75 in the past year, right? Because like 19 people bought the book. So I remember when I first wrote this piece on Elizabeth Warren, and then it's like when Donald Trump, like this is way before the presidency, he was calling her Pocahontas. People found out that she had claimed Cherokee ancestry. And so I wrote about this because then it was like, does she count as Cherokee, when at the same time, the chief or the principal of the Cherokee Nation was of the same blood quantum. So, like if you want to think about like who's authentic, like here we have the leader of this tribe, and then this person who's in academia, and then the Senate, and they're both like, genetically the same, but then we have differences in the way that people grew up and the culture that surrounds them. What is it that is the claiming feature of Native identity? So this time when I wrote this, I was amazed at the response it got. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there were all these comments. And, in the time that I wrote this, I don't think the comments are on there anymore, but there were about like 800 comments on this. And this is back in 2012. And I remember I thought like, I've gotten 800 comments on this thing that I wrote, in less than a week. And I've gotten more comments on this than the entire amount of citations that I've ever gotten on any of my academic books, right? Like my work in academia is super important. I love doing it. But then sometimes I'd be like, who's reading this? Like, 4 people bought the book last year. Maybe someone is using it for a term paper, but then this is quite different. So I continue to write about Native issues, family issues, mixed race issues in all kinds of different settings. And I started to write more about film. So I wrote about the film Loving versus Virginia. I wrote about the TV show Stranger Things. I profiled a couple of celebrities. And then I remember this movie was coming out, Wind River, in 2017. And the director of the film was saying he was going to cast all Native people in the Native roles. And so I thought, like, I got to write about this because, there's this definite approach to how Natives are represented in Hollywood, right? It's always like super past, right? It's very stereotyped. It's not a diverse acceptance of who people are, where they live, how people talk, what they look like, right? People may be familiar with the film Smoke Signals, and there's a great line in there where, the 2 guys are laughing, and then Victor tells his friend and cousin, like, what are you doing? Get stoic, right? And then, so this was an article, and I quoted that line in the article. How is it that we determine who counts and who does not? So when I became a parent, I started dealing with these issues of diversity in children's literature. So I could find all kinds of books, right? You can always find books about animals. You can find books about blonde kids. You can find books about blonde kids with their animals, going on summer vacation, doing all these fun things, all kinds of stories everywhere, right? So my partner is Asian American. I'm African American, Native American. So then I was looking for books for all 3 of these things, right? Things that represented where I came from, Seminole Nation in Oklahoma. I wanted my kids to know about like African-American history, culture, things that we do. And I could find books about Black people. I could find books about Asian people. Then I got to finding kids' books about Native people, and I was coming up super short. So I continued to look, and I thought, like, there must be a problem. Maybe there's a special place where you can find all these books because I can't find them myself. Maybe there is a dearth of something that's out there. And I kept searching. I went to my local bookstore in Manhattan. I went to the library. I went to Barnes and Noble. They were coming up short. And so I was so mad and so incensed. And it was like, do Native kids not exist? Because the only books I could find were like Thanksgiving, people that lived 400 years ago, pilgrims, people being all happy, eating turkey, right? But nothing about like, oh, look at this little Indian kid that wants to learn how to tie his shoes. Here's this other story of going to school on the first day, nothing modern. So I decided to write my own book, and it became Fry Bread. And so I always loved making fry bread with my grandmas. There's always like, you know, every Native family has like some fry bread lady in it or an aunt. All those old ladies in my family died, and no one else seemed to be stepping up to the job. So I became the fry bread lady of my family. And now, you know, it tails me everywhere I go. People are like, okay, when are you making fry bread? We're all ready for this. And it's such a great metaphor, because fry bread, everybody's fry bread looks different. In different parts of the country, people use different ingredients. Some people, the shapes are different. And I thought it was such a great analogy for the many and various ways that Native people can look, where they live, what we eat, what we do. It's so diverse, and there's not just one story that's out there. So I used fry bread as a way to talk about all of these different issues that I've always been interested in. But then for fry bread, it's the same issue, but just for an audience of short people. Thanks.
Awesome. Fry bread is something that we all as Native folks and non-Native folks can relate to. So thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing your story. And next we'll go on to Denise. Denise, you can share how you got into writing children's books. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Bujuanin, the Wabanung Ikwe Dijinakas, Ashijak Nidodem, Mikanakwa Jun and Dunjiba, Mingwich Kakina Awaya. Thank you all for being here this morning. My tribal name is Morning Star Woman, and I am from the Turtle Mountain Reservation here in North Central North Dakota. And my clan is the Crane clan. So yes, I am mostly known as a poet. So this is my first children's book, and I presented it for the first time in Minnesota a couple of weeks ago at the children's book festival. So I'm still really new at this and at presenting the book. I talked to 50 second graders the other day on Zoom. So that was an experience for all of us, but that was fun. I've been a poet. I've been writing poetry since I was 10 years old, but much like Kevin mentioned, when I was in high school in the late 60s and early 70s, in my first 2 years in college, I didn't see any other Native poets. So I had told my poetry teacher in high school, because she said, Denise, you can write. And I thought, oh, poor Mrs. Avshalomoff, she doesn't know that Indians really don't write. So I had no mentor. So I just figured in my mind that Indians just didn't write. So it wasn't until 1984, I did keep writing, because when you're a poet or a writer, you can't not write. So I did keep writing on pieces of paper, on envelopes, just wherever I was, took a few classes. And then in 1984, I found a book. And not only was the author female, she was Native, and she's from my reservation. And that was Louisa Drake, 1984, Love Medicine. So I thought, holy smackers, we do write, and my tribe writes, and Native write, and women write. So, and it just happened, she's from my tribe. So her and Hyde, Erdrich, her sister, came up here, and they started doing workshops here in the Turtle Mountain Reservation. And so I brought my work to her. She read it overnight. She took me out by a bird tree, an old oak tree here by a lake. And she looked at me and she said, Denise, you can write. And this time I believed it. So my first poetry book, called Dragonfly Dance, came out in 2010. And Louise did the the introduction. So that was so cool. So that was a lot of years, from the time I was like 10 years old, all the poems and so on, and that went into this book. Then I had a couple chapbooks, and my latest book of poems is called His Feathers Were Chains. And this one is by North Dakota State University Press. And it's won a couple awards, so that's pretty cool. So this is it took 10 years between these two books to come up with another full book. But as was mentioned, I'm also a professor, and like Kevin mentioned, we had to do a lot of writing, publish our pairs. So I have a lot of essays out there, a lot of academic books, academic stories, and essays and so on that I needed to write for tenure. So the biggest book right now that's hitting the national scene, and I mean also international, is my book Stringing Rosaries. This is my academic book. I did research for this book while I was a professor, and my interest in is about boarding schools. It's called The History of the Unforgivable and the Healing of Northern Plains American Indian Boarding School Survivors. So my parents are boarding school survivors, along with my grandfathers. Their fathers are all boarding school survivors. So I grew up hearing some of their stories, and then I decided to interview them and interview my grandfathers before they passed away. So then I just decided to do a deeper, in-depth, qualitative interview research study for them. And so the book came out a few years ago. Since they found the babies at Kamloops in the middle of June, I've had, because of this book, interviews, requests from China, from Al Jazeera English. They just came here and interviewed me live. That was pretty cool. Australia is interested in coming up, but COVID and some of the travel are an issue right now. So the book has hit a national audience, and it was published by North Dakota State University. And I had shopped it around for a while, but what I did with this book was that I interviewed you from the time you were born until today to see what your boarding school was like, what your life was like before you went to boarding school, during boarding school, and now. So, it's I've had over 30 interviews since the middle of June with media interest, including Nightline is taking their time, ABC Nightline, the Al Jazeera was Spotline, so they're taking their time in interviewing people also for this. And of course, yesterday or October 30th was Orange Shirt Day. So very emotional day for me, and hundreds of thousands of other Native people that were boarding school survivors are intergenerationals like I am. I had 2 generations in boarding schools, but I wasn't sent to boarding school. Don't speak my language, trying to relearn it. Both my parents only spoke their tribal language when they went to boarding school. After boarding school, they never spoke their language again because they didn't want us kids to go through the hell that they went through. So another chapbook I have from Mammoth Publication is called Bitter Tears, and it has to do with the cemetery in Chemawa. So my father was sent from here in northern North Dakota in 1925 at 9 years old to Chemawa, Oregon, 3 days and 3 nights on a train. The people who raised him, the older couple, was an older Cree couple because his mom had died in the 1918 flu epidemic. They hid him. They would tell him to run and hide in the bush. So those are my academic books. So I'm also a powwow dancer, and this story started, my daughter is now like 47 years old. So when she was about 5 years old, she stepped out of a teepee at a powwow and she saw a bird flying, and she lifted her little arms and said, me, take me. So the book started, my interest was in wrapping a story around that. And she's a fancy shell dancer. She was at that time. And the only other book I saw, like Kevin said, looking around for children's books about dancing, is a book by Cynthia Leitek Smith called Jingle Dancer. I said, well, darn, she's already did that. But my daughter was a fancy shell dancer. So I wrapped this book around her story. It's sort of loosely based on that, but that was a true incident. And just a coming out ceremony that we used to do a long time ago, not so much anymore. When our kids were the first time into the powwow arena, they would do a giveaway and a dance, an honor dance for them and so on. So that's what I based the book on. And as some of you may know, Louisa Drake and her sister is a pediatrician, but she's also a watercolor artist. So Minnesota Historical Society, they vetted 3 artists, and I had asked Angie, because I'd seen her artwork, I said, would you consider, doing it for the book? And so here she won the vetting. So here, Kevin, here's a picture of the big fiber that we came up with. And we had so much fun collaborating on this, which a lot of authors don't get to with the artist. So we named it, what should we name the fiber truck? Oh, we came up with all kinds of crazy names late at night. And we decided to call it Doughboy's Indian Tacos. And he's a little doughboy, and he has he has braids and feathers in his hat. Eh? So anyway, so that's my fiber story. So we went to powwows, and she came up with all these drawings of different dancers at powwows. She painted me in there. This is my friend Bev from South Dakota. This is Louisa Drake's daughter. And Louisa Drake just won a Pulitzer Prize for her book, The Night Watchman. This is who it's based on. It's her grandfather. And I remember I danced with him a lot in the late 60s, early 70s. So it's a picture of him. So the book is just full of, she said, can I put my dog Zuzu in there? I said, absolutely. We collaborated on everything. What should the ladies wear? I said, well, they should wear ribbon skirts or calico. Yeah, so what should Josie look like? And she actually used my beadwork for some of the designs. So here's some of the mom, my auntie, grandma, they all come up with it. So when I first wrote the book, it was accepted, and then she brought it to Shannon Penfeather at Minnesota Historical Society, brought it to the committee, and they said, well, we kind of want something to happen. Something has to happen, and it has to be resolved nowadays in their children's books. So I came up with that Josie wanted to dance at the powwow, but she didn't have her outfit. So she asked her mom, her grandma, her kukum, and she asked Grandma Greatwalker, who the family did let me use their name to name them. And Grandma Greatwalker did give us our tribal names a long time ago. So that was the tension. So she's actually at the powwow getting her hair braided, and she goes, well, nobody's here with my outfit. Where's my dress? Where's my shawl? Where's my moccasins and leggings? And then when she looks up, ta-da, everybody's there. And Grandma is ready with her spirit name. So then they go on, and they have her honor dance, and everybody comes out and welcomes her and dances with her. So that's the story. So, yep.
That's just wonderful, Denise, and such beautiful illustrations to go along with your words, as well as the illustrations that were in the other fry bread book. Fry bread is making me hungry here. So thank you so much. All right, well, let's go on to David then. David, will you talk to us a little bit about your art? I always say art because I think writing is an art. So thank you, David.
Hello, everyone. Hihani Washte. I am David Heska Wanbli Wyden, and I'm coming to you today from Denver, Colorado. And what a pleasure it is to be here. Thank you to the South Dakota Festival. Thank you to all of the organizers, and thank you to my fellow panelists. It's just wonderful to be here today. I'll be talking later on this evening about novels, but I'm happy to talk today about my journey as a children's book author. So this is kind of a first for me. I do a lot of panels and events, and this is, I think, the first time I've ever been on a panel with all professors that also write fiction or children's books. It's never happened for me before. About a month ago, I was on an all Sichangu Lakota panel with my friend Larissa Fasthorse, and that was a first, but this is a first today, because I think all of us are professors. I'm a full professor of Native American Studies here in Denver, and I think we're all professors, not in English, but in other disciplines, and that's a first for me. So how wonderful. I'll briefly talk about my journey. So much like Kevin, and Kevin, by the way, if you're still with us, what a pleasure it was to learn that you have a PhD in political science. I didn't know that. My PhD is in political science as well. And I think there are only about 10 of us in the entire discipline of political science that are natives. Yeah. And so I was not aware of you. I haven't seen you at any conferences. And so this is just there you are. This is just a pleasure to learn that you have a background in political science as well. Like Kevin, I have an academic book out. It sold around 3,000 copies from NYU Press on the US Supreme Court. And I've written dozens of articles and such, all of which maybe, a handful of people ever read. And so I started having, this itch about 10 years ago to learn how to write seriously. So I began a creative writing study first at the Vermont College of Fine Arts, and then I transferred to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, where I studied creative writing with a variety of people. Some of my classmates there are my friend Tommy Orange and lots of other folks. And so I threw myself into the study of creative writing the way that I threw myself earlier into the study of law and statistics. My political science degree is in quantitative analysis. And so I threw myself into creative writing, and like Kevin, I also am a father. I have two boys, but about 10 years ago, when I was looking for picture books for them, I could find very few that dealt with Native issues, and none about the great leaders of my nation. I'm an enrolled citizen of the Sichangu Lakota Oyate, and there was nothing about Spotted Tail. I could find things on Crazy Horse, Geronimo, Sitting Bull, but there was nothing about the great leader of our nation. And this saddened me. And so about 4 years ago, the wonderful publisher Raycraft put out a call for children's literature. And so I responded immediately. I said, there needs to be a picture book or middle grade biography about our great leader, who is Spotted Tail. I don't know if y'all can see it in the glare here. Spotted Tail is the wonderful, the amazing and legendary leader of the Rosebud Sioux tribe. He was our great hero, but there have been a couple of biographies of him, adult biographies, but none that were exclusively for children. And so I pitched it, and to my great surprise, they accepted it, and they hired a native illustrator, Jim Yellowhawk, who really just did some of the greatest artwork I've ever seen in the book. Not on this particular page, but he uses ledger art, which is a uniquely native art form. And I was so pleased that this book came out as beautifully as it did. And so again, I wrote this book because I wanted Sichangu children to have their own picture book that they could read about the leaders of our nation, the great leader of our nation. But I also wanted to educate folks, that were non-native. So I threw in some appendices and just some information that was age appropriate. And I did not take any royalties for this book. Instead, I've sent free copies to every elementary school and every library on all of the Lakota reservations. And so, of course, and I was going to do a bunch of school visits, but then the pandemic hit. Now, I also write fiction. This is my novel, Winter Counts, which came out about a year ago. And I'll talk a little bit about that journey. So in addition to children's books, I wanted to write adult fiction. Now, this is most certainly not a children's book, okay? So do not let children anywhere within 10 or 20 feet of this book, okay? Because it is most certainly for adults. Winter Counts, published by HarperCollins, is the best-selling novel dealing with Virgil Wounded Horse, who lives on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. I won't talk about this book very much today since it's a children's literature panel, but I'll say that, like Kevin, I was delighted that my novel has done so well. It sold about 75,000 copies. It's been translated into 5 languages. It's been optioned for film. So we're currently talking with some major film studios, my film people are. And I've gotten literally hundreds and hundreds of letters of fan mail of people saying, thank you for educating me. I didn't know about these issues in Native country. And I think that's why we do this. I love my academic work, as Kevin said, but I also love reaching a broader audience. And so Spotted Tail, I hope, has reached children across the country. And I know that Winter Counts has certainly reached people and hopefully done some good. I'll talk just a moment here, and then I want to leave some time for questions and answers. Some of the themes that I talk about, both in my book Spotted Tail and in Winter Counts, are boarding schools. Denise talked a little bit about boarding schools. My own grandmother was a student at the Carlisle Indian School, one of the most horrific of the Native boarding schools. And I just visited there, by the way. It's a very emotional experience to visit the grounds of the Carlisle Indian School. They have a building there that they call the guardhouse, but really what it was is it was a jail cell for 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old Native children. It's a stone building, completely dark inside, and the thought of a 5, 6, 8-year-old Native child being put in this terrible building, it broke my heart. It was horrifying to see it in person. And possibly my own grandmother spent some time in there. So the boarding schools are a massive, massive stain upon American history. And so I do touch upon boarding schools because Spotted Tail was one of the first Native leaders to send his children to boarding schools, but he went to Carlisle when he saw what was happening and he pulled them out. He said, "You're coming back with me." And so he pulled them out. And then in Winter Counts, I briefly touch about boarding schools in the sequel, which I'm writing right now. Boarding schools will also play a part. So boarding schools are obviously an issue and a theme that I touch upon in an age-appropriate way. I also briefly touch in this book about the murder of Spotted Tail, which resulted in a law called the Major Crimes Act. There's not enough time really to get into it today, but the whole concept of Winter Counts is the broken criminal justice system on reservations. The criminal justice system on reservations, it does not function well. About 40% of all felony crimes go unpunished because of the failure of the United States government. And so private vigilantes have stepped in, like my fictional character, Virgil Wounded Horse, to try and get justice for families who have been wronged. And so I touch upon this briefly, but I think it's important for people to know that Native people are being disadvantaged in a terrible way by the failure of the US government to provide adequate criminal justice enforcement on our reservations. Child molesters, rapists, murderers should not go unpunished. They should be caught, and in my view, they should be treated appropriately. And I believe that sovereignty means that we Native nations should have the authority to punish our own citizens, using our own criminal justice systems. Instead, we must defer those crimes to the FBI and the US Attorney's Office. This is something called the Major Crimes Act, which I wrote about in the New York Times about a year ago. If anybody wants to read my thoughts on that, go to my webpage, davidwyden.com, and you can see links to all of my articles and such. Let me wrap this up because I see a question coming in. I just want to say that the beauty of children's literature is we can open up children's minds, in such a lovely and wonderful way. And the beauty of fiction overall is that we can entertain and educate. And as much as I love my academic work, it's this ability to reach a broad audience and really stimulate a national discussion that has been truly wonderful over the last year. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David. You do some very intriguing work. And I think that having those role models as Spotted Tail and even Virgil, he teaches us things as well. And to educate and to bring people have a better understanding of our Native people, I think is wonderful. There is one question in the chat box, and if you is Kevin still with us? If each one of you could answer really fast. It says, did the authors find it easy to write children's books as compared to adult books? It seems it's harder to get a story across in fewer words than more.
Yeah, I can address that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 700 words. It went through quite a few revisions for just 700 words for a children's picture book. But what the fun part was that I'm a poet, and I'm writing for young children that love that iambic pentameter and so on. So I did have fun trying to put some inner rhyme and chime and end rhyme words and so on. So I had fun. I enjoyed it. It's easier than doing an academic essay, that's for sure.
How about you, Kevin? Kevin, you're muted.
There we go. Yeah.
Oh,
Is it harder to write children's books? Yes. Yeah, I mean, I've been working on a book just about the uncomfortableness of singing the Pledge of Allegiance as like a little native kid in school. And it is just the hardest thing that I've ever written. And I've been working on this for about a year and a half. And it's a
Wow.
poem. Yeah, and sorry, my volume earlier, so I had to like restart my computer. But definitely, I think it can be very hard to write children's books because you don't have as many words.
How about you, David?
Well, my take on this is not that it's harder or easier, at least in my case, it's that it's different. You know, when I'm writing a children's book, and I've got another one in the works, you know, it's hitting the right tone, it's being economical with words, it's you know, really having to think about what just I want to come back to the word tone. What is the appropriate tone for a say a 10-year-old? A novel presents a different set of challenges when you're writing 85 or 90,000 words and you're keeping 3 or 4 narrative strands going, narrative threads going, you know, and also, you know, that's hard. It takes me about a year and a half to write a novel, and then you have to edit it and such. So they each have, at least in my case, from my perspective, different challenges. And right now I'm in the middle of writing the sequel, and I'm struggling, you know, to write this book and you know, really hit the right keys in my adult fiction. So they're different, and they're both wonderful in their own way.
I'm currently trying to write a middle grade novel based on my father's boarding school experience in Chimawa. And so 700 words, and then this one should be about 14,000 words for a middle grade novel, 3rd grade on up, because of the trauma that I'm including in there. It needs an older audience. And I have about 6,000 words, and it's like, okay, I'm done. So yeah, so I'm going to probably take a year to figure out how to fill up some more chapters.
Well, I'm sure that you'll do a fine job. It's I appreciate the passion in all three of yours, your writing, and also the work that you put into it. You know, it takes a great deal of work to really think about how you're going to present your information to young people. It's a wonderful task that you're doing. So how these 3 adult writers became children's book authors. I was kind of curious. I know we only have a few minutes here, but I was kind of curious how you, what your favorite book was, children's book growing up. Do you remember?
I'm too old to read. I had all kinds of children's books. Yeah. I was into horses, Misty of Chincoteague, and the Narnia books, and Nancy Drew. Yeah. So I read vociferously. I read constantly. It was my escape from a real traumatic upbringing. So I read everything I could get my hands on. And back then, the librarians at the public library would only let us check out 3 books. So I would go through those easily in a week. So I'm glad now we can check out more books.
Great. What's your favorite book, Kevin, when you were a kid?
I really like The Little House by Virginia Lee Burton. Do you remember those? She had like all these books, and the theme of all of them was protesting obsolescence, right? Everything's right about, like, it'd be like technology and the city is getting bigger, but then there's an old thing that people should not forget. And so The Little House, it was like a house in the country, and then the city started to envelop it, and then the house fell into disrepair, and you know the city is growing bigger, bigger, bigger around it, and then they moved the little house out to the country so that it can start its new life all over again. I used to love that book. Oh my God.
Oh, cool. Good you can remember that. Well, you're young, so.
Yeah.
David, what is your favorite kids' book?
Boy, kids' book. I loved comics. I love the Peanuts comic strip. I know that's not really a kid's book, but oh man, did I just love and identify with those characters. But later on, when my reading skills developed a little bit more, I loved the Encyclopedia Brown. Does anybody remember this? You know, so early kind of crime fictions. I never really did Hardy Boys or any of that. And then, of course, the classic Charlotte's Web. And then I was a weird kid. I was a voracious reader like all of us. But my parents had like the complete works of Poe. Edgar Allan Poe. And so I'm throwing myself into Edgar Allan Poe at age 8. And man, that no doubt that warped me in a really bad way. You know, that's some crazy stuff. But I still remember just reading and trying to understand what was going on. But for kids' books, absolutely, you know, what we could get at the time was not very diverse, obviously, but Charlotte's Web, you know, Encyclopedia Brown, you know, thankfully the landscape has changed.
Yes. Yes, that is exciting. It has changed. All right, there's a question, another question in the chat here. Jennifer wants to know would you all talk a little bit more about working with the illustrators of your books? I know Denise has talked a little bit. So whoever hasn't, you can talk again too, Denise, if you'd like, but would you like to talk a little bit about your illustrators?
I would love to hear Kevin. I saw him at the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators talk about his book. So I would love to hear Kevin.
Oh yeah, my illustrator, thanks. My illustrator is Juana Martinez Neal, and we became friends. It was, you know, you have these ideas that when you write a children's book that you're not supposed to talk to the illustrator. And everyone always asks these questions at every panel. But then there are a lot of illustrators that invite that. And so I think, especially if you're writing a native topic and you're the author and there's someone else illustrating, and if they're not native, you have to be on them because they could be doing stuff like, oh, look, I'm gonna put this friendly owl in the background of this, and, you know, just like crazy stuff that you have to be like, no, you can't do that. Or, you know, rosy red cheeks. And then all the kids look kind of crazy. So we had to work together. It was really difficult for Juana. And I just remember we're at the Macmillan offices. And this seemed like a million years ago. And we spread all the illustrations out on the table. And then I was like, okay, we got to go through each one of these illustrations. And it was like the people go through pictures like this with the jeweler's eye. And I went through and I remember that I had 43 Post-it notes on one page of things for this. And that was one page. And so I'm sure that she was like, oh my God, Kevin's driving me nuts. But then I remember I was like, we got to do this. I want this to be the best it can possibly be. I don't want anybody coming after us and saying like, you know, you forgot this or you did this in the wrong way. We had a bunch of people read it, but we have each other's phone numbers. We text each other. We visit each other when we're passing through. And the easiest way for us to get to know each other was she went on all my social media that I have on private and rated all of my pictures and asked me to send her all pictures of my family, where I'm from, you know, what we do in New York. And she used a lot of those. And we ended up being the family in Fry Bread, me and my children.
All right. Well, that's wonderful. Actually working from reality there. How
Real
about you?
reality.
Yeah. How about you, David?
Well, my experience was quite different than Kevin's. And for any writers or aspiring emerging writers out there, let me kind of tell you what I tell my students. So in addition to being a professor of Native American Studies, I teach in 2 MFA programs and Master of Fine Arts writing programs. And you know, you really have to take control of your own process. I am thrilled to hear that Kevin had a collaborative relationship with his illustrator. I love the art in Spotted Tail, but I did not have any contact whatsoever with my illustrator. Raycraft handled that. And it turned out beautifully because I'm not sure I could have said anything. Now, again, Jim Yellowhawk is native, and so he did a beautiful job. But if I can switch from kids to grown-up books, you know, I have learned that you really need to insert yourself into the process. For example, some of my translators for my foreign editions, they contacted me, but long after the fact. And you need to kind of, and my audio book as well, you need to really be not pushy, but you need to be like, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you. If you need to learn how to pronounce a word, a native word for the audiobook, you need to let them know. If there's some help on a translation, you need to tell them. It's like, I'm here and I'm available to help you. So now with my other, my most recent translations, I work much more closely with the translators to make sure that they're getting the flavor in English of what I want them to have. And I think that can apply to kids' books as well. The more collaborative relationship you have, the better the final product is going to be.
Awesome. I agree with that. All right, folks, I on behalf of the South Dakota Humanities Council, thank you very much for presenting today. And it's wonderful to see Denise again and to meet Kevin and David. I look forward to seeing your future works. And thank you for sharing your expertise. And thank you to all in the Zoom and Facebook audience for attending. And Wopila Tonka for your help. Don't forget to visit our website, South Dakota Festival Book festival.com/virtual, and for more programming. And I'm so happy that you were here today. Have a good day. Apete wash day. Lila Wopila. Goodbye, folks.